RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with PMA. The COVID response minister, Chris Hipkins, says New Zealand must be prepared for more international vessels carrying crew infected with COVID-19 to ask for help. He says logistics will determine where the deep-sea fishing boat Viking Bay will dock and disembark 15 crew, including 2 with the highly contagious Delta variant.
And we need to make sure that we are prepared for that and that we can facilitate that. We don't want people floating out at sea if they're sick from COVID. We do want to be able to bring them on shore and make sure they're getting the isolation and the treatment that they need so that they are all kept safe.
The Ports of Auckland has just received a request for the Viking Bay to come to Auckland. If the vessel comes to Auckland, it would berth in one of the 2 quarantine anchorages available. The Minister of Health also says a second foreign-owned fishing vessel has reported crew members with flu-like symptoms. The COVID-19 response minister admits the contact labels it used in Auckland's February outbreak caused confusion and they've been ditched. Chris Hipkins has been responding to a review of how the 15-person outbreak centred around Papatoetoe High School. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
As health authorities grappled with 6,000 contacts in the outbreak, new terms with new testing or isolating requirements suddenly emerged: close plus and casual plus. The review says that led to confusion and then people not complying. One high-profile case saw the Prime Minister criticise a KFC staff member for working when she was a contact and the worker pushing back that she wasn't told to stay home. Mr Hipkins agrees the terms didn't work and says they now just use close or casual when referring to contacts.
New South Wales has recorded its highest daily tally of COVID-19 cases in 14 months. 38 new cases have been detected, 11 of which have been in the community while infectious. The Premier Gladys Berejiklian says a particular problem is people defying Sydney's lockdown rules to visit family and friends.
We don't want to prolong the lockdown. We don't want to see Sydney or New South Wales go in and out of lockdown until we have the vast majority of our population vaccinated. So it's really up to us, all of us, to step up, as difficult as it is.
Meanwhile, 2 new community cases of COVID-19 have been detected in Queensland. The developer of a marina on Waiheke Island says a video showing a security guard kicking a protester in the face is not an accurate representation of the incident. Protesters occupying the Kennedy Point site say the development endangers a nearby blue penguin colony. In a video posted to Facebook yesterday, a protester on a pontoon is manhandled into the water by a man wearing a high-vis jacket. While the man is in the water, a guard takes a step and kicks him in the face. Marina Director Kit Littlejohn says the protest is no longer being conducted in a peaceful manner. He says there has been significant offending aimed at security guards. Mr Littlejohn says an internal investigation has begun. The police are also investigating. In a highly unusual move, Nationals given Labour MP Louisa Wall one of its speaking slots so she could participate in a parliamentary debate on mental health. The subject was the Zero Suicide Report commissioned by the Cross-Party Mental Health and Addiction Wellbeing Group. National's Matt Ducey was highly critical of Labour's treatment of Ms Wall.
What I think is absolutely disgusting is Labour blocked Louisa Wall from taking a call in this debate. Louisa Wall is a founding member of the Cross-Party Mental Health Group. She championed this report and worked hard on it.
The Labour Party Whip, Kieran McNulty, says the government decided it was important to allocate spots to the most relevant ministers, the chair of the Health Select Committee and MPs representing Māori and rural communities. It's 4 minutes past 5. The All Blacks coach Ian Foster says Aaron Smith has earned the right to captain the side. Halfback Smith will skipper the side for the first time on Saturday night against Fiji in Dunedin. Foster has made 13 changes to the starting 15 from last week's win over Tonga, with Geordie Barrett at fullback and David Havili at second 5, while the front row and loose forwards have been swapped completely. It will be the Highlander Stars' 98th test for New Zealand, and Foster says Smith has been a vital part of the All Blacks for a decade.
He is a big part of our whole leadership group. He's grown to become an outstanding, preparer for a test match, and we watched his leadership through the Highlanders, and I thought he did a great job there as well. So it gives us a lot of confidence to give him that title.
Smith will be partnered by Bowden Barrett in the halves against Fiji, with Barrett starting at first 5. A contentious refereeing decision has helped England to advance to the final of the European Football Championship. England's captain Harry Kane scored the winning goal in extra time to defeat Denmark 2-1 and clinch their first semi-final victory in 55 years. Kane scored in the 104th minute after England were awarded a penalty. England manager Gareth Southgate believes England deserved the result.
I think we had the better of the chances and we created far more chances. So probably on the balance of the game, I think we deserved it. But if you're to say to me that the penalty was soft, I can understand.
England return to Wembley for the final against Italy on Monday morning. That's the news.
Claims Port Taranaki got it wrong.
We really feel for the crew now. We're part of a team of 5 million, are they?
Questions about the vaccine rollout.
But of course it has meant a 4.5-hour round trip to go to Queenstown to actually get it done. We are being disadvantaged.
And a nail-biting football semi.
First time we've been in a semi-final since we won it back in 92, which I still remember. It's a big day. So, big against England.
On the Ball, Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from that 7 to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula and Central High Country. Fine spells, a few showers, especially in the west. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay fine. However, isolated coastal showers for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay tomorrow morning. Whanganui to Wellington and Wairarapa, mostly cloudy. Mostly fine. Isolated showers developing tonight, then clearing early tomorrow morning. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury mostly fine. Isolated showers tonight. Bulla, a few showers becoming more frequent tomorrow afternoon. Westland, Northern Fiordland and Otago, fine spells and isolated showers. Dry everywhere tomorrow morning. For Southern Fiordland and Southland, showers, a period of rain tomorrow afternoon. Snow to 400 metres, lowering to 200 metres tomorrow. And Tasman Islands, fine at first, a few showers developing tonight, turning to rain tomorrow night. RNZ National. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rasi whānau, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It's a mind-boggling and a sickening environment to be in. That from a former Fiji health minister who is warning the worst is still to come for the island nation, with people running short of food, the morgue full, and body bags running out. Yesterday it recorded 791 new COVID cases and 3 deaths. The country's Prime Minister, Frank Bainimarama, has resisted calls for a 1-month full lockdown, saying it would completely cripple Fiji economically. But Dr. Neil Sharma, who served as Health Minister between 2009 and 2014, describes an island nation that is already crippled.
The health systems like Butternut being hammered every day. Hospitals are kind of full, the mortuary is full, we're running low on body bags, and it's not a very good situation to be in. The question was whether we ought to lock down or whether we need to run free as we are.
What do you think, Doctor? Should you be in lockdown?
It's a kind of catch-22 situation here. On one hand, we have 20% of Suva's population, the largest Suvarnasuri corridor, which houses over 200,000 people, a quarter of Fiji's population. 20% of the people live in water settlements, slums. They are becoming redundant as a result of no activity and being laid off, and people need to have food on the table. They've been drawing out of their superannuation or their Fiji National Provident Fund, and there's a limit to what the government can provide. I don't know what actually is happening. The government's not verbalizing its position. I think the leaders ought to stand up and say, yes, we need to, this is the path we're following, and then the people understand. So there's a lot of anger and frustration on the social media.
So what is it like for those people, Dr. Sharma, who have lost their jobs and are living in, well, crowded, basic conditions? How are they managing? Are they getting food?
Well, what happens is the NGOs are working very hard, providing small food in small amounts, in a week supply or a fortnight supply. But when you're living in these squalid conditions, what happens is social distancing is thrown out the window. You have 6-7 people living in one room, a window, a shade, and so how you separate, how you social distance is a problem. Then you got to get out and earn some money. So if you can't earn money, you beg, borrow, steal. So, you climb somebody's coconut tree and you get all the coconuts, and then you sit on the roadside and sell the coconuts. So it's not a very, sort of impressive scene. You feel very sad. The children are going hungry as a consequence. So, it's a very compounded position we are in. And then the health system is not, it's overloaded, it's full. We've got people in the home confinement. But then again, with this sort of situation, what sort of thing happens? People that don't seem to seek help don't have that health-seeking behavior. They only arrive when they're gasping or they're dead.
Why is that, Doctor? Why are people leaving it till, well, in many cases it's simply too late? Why are they waiting that long to go to hospital?
Well, what happens is the hospitals are so full, and the waiting lines are so full and long, and then at the same time, and you have to look at the cultural part of it, people believe in traditional medicine and, traditional Ayurvedic medicine, and they don't turn up adequately in time. So when they don't turn up in time, it's something which everybody needs to be concerned about, because it affects the socially deprived. And they don't turn up, maybe they don't have a taxi fare, or they ring and then ambulance service is not able to provide the service. It's a mind-boggling and a very sickening environment to be in at present.
Are you expecting it to get worse? And what are you telling people in terms of what they should do to prepare?
Well, what we're saying is that it's bound to get worse, because what happens is cases are escalating. And then obviously, if you look at international data, the deaths follow in about 10 days' time. So you're going to get more deaths, you're going to get more cases, and with this sort of scenario, it will spread into the community. And then without a lockdown, we've got another problem. And then the vaccinations are coming in dribs and drabs. What we need is an effective vaccination program preceded by good public awareness, and it needs to be an all-of-society involvement. We need to get the churches involved. We need to get the faith groups and the NGOs working with the government. At this stage, it's sort of the social platform is not strong enough to provide food, I think, and as a consequence, the government is hesitating to lock down, because they will not have the finances to provide the food and nourishment people need.
Are you advising people to gather food and be prepared to isolate and stay at home?
Yes, exactly. Because what happens is we've got to go back to the land, so we've got to plant something, and we've got to fish for your protein. So we're saying go and do your backyard gardening, your little pepes, we call it. Plant your cassava, and so that you are sustainable in using natural food. Prices of food are already on the increase, because transportation is not there, and in developed countries where things are being manufactured, they're having difficulty with labor and resources. And we need the vaccines. If we get the vaccines in time, within a 3-month period, if we get the herd immunity with 60-70% of our population covered, we would be able to avoid further lockdowns.
If you do lock down, will the people who are living in these slum areas need extra assistance? Food provision? Obviously. They are the people in need. There's a lot of social inequity
and they need more support than the people who are partly employed or have options of being able to support themselves to a certain extent.
What can a country like New Zealand do to help? Do you need more help from us, and what kind?
Well, I think New Zealand and Australia, sort of doing so much for Fiji. I think your efforts should be targeted to non-governmental organizations to be able to distribute food and rations. I think food and ration is the most important thing at this point in time. I think our health systems are sort of under a lot of strain. They need to be able to identify what their needs are. We're running out of not only, if you're looking at COVID, we have one of the highest incidence of NCDs in the world. Kidney failure, heart disease. So we're running low on medication. And I wish there would be some means of being able to looking after these people a lot more effectively. With the hospitals are closed or are being sanitized and disinfected and all that. The clinics are closed, the pharmacies are closed. So these people are wandering around without medication. So we want to get a high incidence of unexplained deaths through other causes such as non-communicable diseases.
What is your worst fear here, Doctor?
I think we're going to lose a lot of people. I think, if there's no clear national plan, a lot more people will die.
Dr. Neil Sharma, it is 16 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarungo mai e haere aki nei. Plans for American Airlines to fly to New Zealand hit a bump in the runway. Many small business owners in Gisborne say they're having sleepless nights as they desperately wait in limbo for answers from the Immigration Department. The rules right now mean they can't get skilled workers, and if the ones they've got go home to family, they say it will be a disaster. Hundreds were at a public meeting today venting their frustration. Our Tairāwhiti reporter Tom Kitchen was there.
It's tough finding people to work in hydraulics around Aotearoa. There's not even a qualification for us. Ellie Smith and Natasha Paulson run Gisborne Hydraulic Services in Te Ranganui-Akiwa. They're a small business of 13 people, and if they want to grow, they can't. As Ellie Smith says, there's simply not enough people.
There's a handful of people who can do it, and they end up going from one business to another to another. It's not filling the gap of our growing industry.
So if they look overseas, they might be able to find the right people. But with COVID putting a halt on immigration, it's making life tough for getting new workers, and for those migrants who are already here. As Natasha Paulson says, they don't know the next steps.
So it's the fact that they've arrived here prior to COVID, and now the goalposts are changing, or we don't even know what the goalposts are.
She says morale is down.
As much as you try, and they try and bring their best game, and a smile on the face, it is constantly ticking in the background, and we've noticed it. And we try and do the best we can, but it's certainly there's a black cloud hanging all over the place. Our three guys are an integral part of what we do here, and so we can't really plan too far forward because we don't know where they're at.
Pedro Van Veren is from South Africa and works for Gisborne Hydraulics. He came to New Zealand for a better life, but his residency application isn't moving forward, and it's worrying his family. He says his son is taking it hard.
At the moment he's so stressed, he's actually on medication to help him sleep because he can't sleep at night. Because he's stressed, he doesn't know what his future is holding for him.
As for Pedro himself,
well, I'm averaging now 4 hours because I'm looking at all possibilities, reading out to see if there's other ways, but yet there's no answers. So it's just a waiting game, and nobody can carry on with their lives. We basically stuck.
Down the road at Total Parts and Services, owner Dave Scammell's in a similar mood. He's facing a myriad of challenges with his immigrant workers. Some want to leave because their families can't get here, and he thinks that spells disaster.
It's graphic because these guys are seriously skilled guys that we've recruited from key businesses or roles that they've been in previously, and they are some of our leading technicians that we rely on heavily every day.
National Party leader Judith Collins is in Gisborne today to meet businesses in a public meeting on the issue. She says New Zealand should be embarrassed with the way it's treating migrants.
We are going to continue to ask the Prime Minister about it. The fact that she always wants to talk about being kind and is actually very unkind to our migrants and their families is an absolute national disgrace.
Immigration Minister Chris Farfoy has been approached for comment but hasn't yet responded.
Homai o whakaaro, let us know your thoughts on that one. Nō reira anei nā kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei. Do you want to see changes to immigration settings in Aotearoa? And what should those look like if you do? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. An aborted takeoff, American Airlines has abandoned plans to fly New Zealand routes from the end of this year. The US's largest airline had earlier committed to flying Auckland to Los Angeles, as well as Auckland, Dallas, and LA to Christchurch. Now, takeoff was supposed to be in 2020, but COVID delayed that. And now uncertainty around New Zealand border restrictions has seen the handbrake ripped on yet again. Ko taku manuhiri anai nei ko Adrian Littlewood, who is the boss of Auckland Airport. Kia ora, Adrian.
Kia ora, Lisa.
How much of a blow is this?
Yeah, look, it's really disappointing. I guess not surprising given the current context, but given the lead time it takes to attract these airlines to looking at New Zealand, then committing fleet, and then actually turning up, it's disappointing. We hope they'll be back in the future, but, these airlines are looking at their next immediate opportunities and where they put those fleet, and right now they can't see that path for New Zealand, obviously in the next little while.
Why can't they see that path in New Zealand? What's the problem?
Well, I suspect it's just the uncertainty around border reopening, what that looks like when it reopens, who will be eligible. It's a pathway. So like any business, they need to have some certainty to plan. And, the lead times for deploying aircraft are long. You've got to have booking lead times, you've got to mobilise crew, ground operations, and this far out from our seasonal peak over summer, typically. I don't think they can say that with confidence, so it's understandable they've pointed that aircraft elsewhere to their markets domestically in their region, which are booming.
Adrian, when would they need to know? Can you give us a sort of timeline? So if you were saying, let's say they're going to come in mid-next year, when would they need to know the lay of the land in New Zealand in order to commit to that?
Yeah, well, I think they were intending to, several airlines, focusing on the summer season to start the route. So if you work back from, say, in October, sort of November start, they'd really need to be knowing about May, June to do that. So around about now would be about the latest you could make that call for some of those flights. So, and look, we hope there are not others that follow this path.
Are you worried that there are?
Oh, certainly. I think this is the sign of what the recovery looks like globally. It's uneven. Certain markets are recovering faster because their vaccination program is more advanced. And those global airlines are saying, well, I don't want to run a route carrying only cargo and no passengers, so I will point that aircraft where I have that need. And if I looked at the stats and saw Dallas-Fort Worth, which is American's home base, is currently flying 900 flights a day. At peak before COVID, they were flying 950. So they're very close back to where they were. And the US market, like the Chinese market domestically, is roaring back to life.
So what signal is New Zealand sending to the outside world then?
Well, I just think we don't have the clarity on what opening looks like, when, and what are the metrics to track and focus on. I think it's understandable why companies will make those decisions, and that's why I think that reopening plan, getting clear on what it is, being clear on what the border settings will look like. Everyone accepts there's still uncertainty. We know that, but at least being clear on what that plan looks like, I think, is quite important for New Zealanders, New Zealand businesses, as well as those flying airplanes to our country.
So is the government letting business down in that respect? When would you expect to see a plan like the 4-level plan that, say, Australia has made public?
Well, I think the Prime Minister has talked about a 4-stage plan of reopening. I think this is all, I believe, contingent on the vaccine program, which is why we've been consistently saying the vaccine program is the most important thing. And as I said last week, in a way, it gives us more planning certainty than we've had in the last 16 months. But we've got to do the work to think about how does it operate and practice at the border in a safe way. And we're doing that work with our colleagues and starting to think about the future, how we organise our systems, our infrastructure. But as you know, aviation is a complex system with many part players. So we've got to have all those participants working in that answer.
But are we working too slow? When you've got the US's biggest airline pulling the pin on an opportunity to come into New Zealand, are we working too slowly? Does it look like we've still got the closed sign out?
Well, I don't think we have clarity on what that sign looks like or the timing on that yet, and that's because the focus has been on the vaccine. I think that focus needs to shift to the future. We have to look ahead to presuming what will happen when the vaccine rollout has hit pace, and we've hit a high level of rollout, because obviously the system design needs to happen earlier, and we can get some clues from around the world. We talked about this last week, where some other countries are starting to shift to different systems, and that thinking needs to be happening now, so when the vaccine rollout has happened at scale, we can operate an effective border that's safe to do so.
How worried are you that we're going to be left behind or are being left behind?
Well, it's certainly a risk, no doubt about it, and we should just be upfront about that and say, we've been later to the vaccine program. It's been a strategy the government has been quite upfront about. It's now coming to pass that the rollout is happening at scale, but we have to, as a country, be willing to work on the answer hard, because there are a lot of families, individuals, businesses who depend on an effective border, and if those airlines have better places to send their planes, despite the government's program to support those cargo routes, which I think was absolutely the right thing to do, country can't keep writing cheques to keep those planes here if they've got better places to be.
Yeah, so this is obviously going to be a passenger route. It was going to be a passenger route with American Airlines, but what are the consequences in terms of freight that they are now no longer coming here?
Yeah, well, look, if you just took a daily 787 plane, flying every day around the year, that would carry about $500 million, so $500 million worth of air freight in value each year. So that's about 14 tons each way a day. And that's obviously very high-value freight. It could be, high-value product going overseas or high-value produce coming into New Zealand. But those are critical routes for time-sensitive products as well, filling up supply chain shortages. For a range of reasons, they are really important. And without that capacity, it becomes another element that might fuel risks around inflation and other constraints on our economy.
And won't it mean the government has to keep subsidising freight at a high level?
And that's a risk, and this is the consequence of that equation of passengers and cargo that comes together on a regular scheduled plane. That equation being broken because the passenger element's not there. So that, I think people are starting to appreciate now the importance of air connectivity. These are expensive bits of kit, and we need them for an island nation at the end of the world.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Adrian Littlewood, who's the boss of Auckland Airport. It is 27 minutes past 5. Kia no tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The weight of Sydney's COVID-19 crisis is starting to really hit home. New South Wales has detected 38 new local cases, 11 of which have been infectious in the community for some time. The daily tally of new cases is the highest in 14 months. World Watch's Max Toll has this report.
People with the virus are passing it on to those they love most.
A stark warning by New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian, who says people in Sydney are still defying the rules to visit family and friends.
The two biggest areas where people are spreading the virus is through household contacts of people close to them and people who are undertaking activity with symptoms. We don't want to prolong the lockdown. We don't want to see Sydney or New South Wales go in and out of lockdown until we have the vast majority of our population vaccinated. So it's really up to us, all of us, to step up, as difficult as it is.
Epidemiologist Professor Tony Blakely from the University of Melbourne says the fact that so many of the new cases have been infectious in the community is particularly worrying. He says even tougher restrictions may be necessary.
The harder the lockdown is, the quicker it is, as a general rule. Everything about COVID has a bit high chances, stochastic and all the rest of it. But as a general rule, if you want your lockdown to be short and effective, you do it as hard as you possibly can. If it could be harder, make it harder, and try and get the damn thing over and done with.
This Sydney local is frustrated by how many people seem to be flouting the rules.
People are still going out. If it's really locked down, it should be different, not like that. Some people, they take it seriously. Some people, they don't believe,
And as Greater Sydney's lockdown moves into its second week, food charities are already reporting a spike in demand for meals. Dario Mukic of the United Workers Union estimates thousands of low-skilled workers aren't getting paid.
Things are really tough for lots of people. The union had a crisis meeting with members and delegates, and we heard plenty of stories of people really struggling, not just casual workers. Casual and insecure workers are always going to have it much harder, but there's plenty of part-time and full-time workers also struggling, because you've got to remember last year a lot of workers had to fund their own crisis. So if they had entitlements, they would have used them up. If they had savings, they would have used them up, and many had to go into their super and use that up as well.
Meanwhile, as New South Wales suffers, there are only 2 new cases in Queensland, which the Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk says is fantastic. Tomorrow in Queensland, the use of QR scanning apps becomes mandatory.
So don't forget, tomorrow the QR code, the check-in app becomes mandatory. So you must check in at a whole range of cafes, restaurants, hairdressers. So please make sure you do that. It just makes our job for our contact tracers so much easier.
Anastasia Palaszczuk also gave a shout-out to 10 hospital staff who exposed themselves to COVID-19 to save the life of a patient who suddenly went into anaphylactic shock while being moved from a COVID ward.
They went in, they saved her life. I'm so proud. I'm proud of each and every one of them, so I thank them. I know that Queenslanders are proud of them as well. And, of course, they'll go into isolation now.
And Victoria has continued its streak of no new cases. It's now been 8 days since community transmission.
Iwi Haere nei I checkpoint. Some kindies are virtually empty as the highly contagious respiratory illness hits. Family life is ripped apart following the South Auckland tornado, and England finally makes it to its first major footy final since 1966. No pressure. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can get in touch via text 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is that time of the evening, so ane a Susanna mina pita kōrero. Kia ora. Ports of Auckland has been asked to allow a foreign fishing vessel with 2 COVID-19 infected crew into its harbour. The Viking Bay is in international waters off Taranaki and will disembark 15 crew when it's able to dock. A port spokesperson says if it goes to Auckland, it will dock at one of 2 quarantine anchorages in the city. A former Fijian health minister warned the worst is yet to come in the nation's escalating COVID-19 crisis. A daily record of nearly 800 new infections and 3 deaths from the Delta variant were confirmed yesterday. The Prime Minister says lockdown would cripple the economy, but Dr. Neil Sharma has told Checkpoint Fiji is already crippled and it's bound to get worse. The COVID-19 response minister has met with the Canterbury DHB over the pace of its vaccine rollout. Chris Hipkins earlier said he expects the DHB to keep up with the national timeframe, but he now recognises it has the largest Group 1 and 2 populations behind Auckland, and he has no doubts about its commitment. An independent review has found the new labels for COVID contacts in Auckland's February outbreak were too complicated and led to rule breaking. There were 6,000 contacts of the 15-person outbreak in the Papatoetoe area. The Health Ministry suddenly created new definitions of close plus and casual plus, but those categories have since been ditched. National has given Labor MP Louisa Wall one of its speaking slots so she can take part in a parliamentary debate on mental health. The debate on the Zero Suicide Report was commissioned by the Cross-Party Mental Health and Addiction Wellbeing Group. National's Matt Ducey has criticised Labor's treatment of Ms Wall, but Labor Party whip Kieran McAnulty says the spots went to the most relevant ministers. The National Party now supports putting folic acid in bread, saying it's been convinced by the science. The government will make it mandatory mandatory to add folic acid to most bread-making flour by mid-2023. Its second attempt to do so after an earlier bid was scuppered by National in 2009. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Nā mihi mo te rā, Susanna. No mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku manuhiri anai nei, ko Nona Peltier, who is in the studio to talk all things business. Now, let's talk about the number of people who are advertising for staff. It's reached a record high.
Yes. So, in June, the number of job ads rose 1% from May. So that doesn't sound like a lot. And it was a big 37% over the year earlier. Now, that does sound like a lot, but remember that that's when we just emerged from lockdown, so you would have expected there to be quite a lull just then. But 24% up on the pre-COVID high. So that's before COVID. 24% up on the highest level we ever reached then. So that means that the number of job ads is substantial, and they're right across the country, and they cover every kind of sector of the economy. People are looking for staff every way. Now, I spoke with Doug Steele, who's the senior economist at BNZ, who puts together these numbers, and he said, well, these numbers don't reflect the economic what the outfall of this is. He said that a recent survey that we had, you might have remembered earlier this week, we talked about the Institute of Economic Research had done some quarterly survey of business opinion, and in there, businesses were looking at increasing wages because of the shortages. And so this is very inflationary. If you've got all of these jobs out there and people are not applying for it, you've got to entice them in and bump up the wages. There's a lot of things you might try, but one of the ways you can make it happen is by paying more, and so that is definitely leading to wage pressures. In turn, that is inflationary. Inflationary means higher interest rates sooner than later.
Let's talk about Silver Fern Farms, because this is kind of ties in to this conversation.
It does.
They are desperate for staff, and they're calling on the government to ease up on immigration restrictions. What exactly... I mean, who are they after, and what exactly are they saying?
Look, they're one of the country's biggest meat producers, and they export, of course, their products. What they're saying is that they don't have enough staff. They've tried to recruit staff, but what is the result is that they don't have enough people, so they've got gaps in their supply, in their processing chain, which means that they're not getting the most value out of their meats. And that's costing them in export dollars.
So they've got lost productivity because they don't have enough staff.
They can't make the most of what their products are, and so that their exports are being hit. They are pleading with the government to ease up on the immigration restrictions. And this is, we're hearing this over and over again. And so I don't know if the government is listening to the plight of some of these businesses, but clearly it's affecting exports. It's affecting companies. Every kind of company, according to the job ad survey, is looking for staff. I mean, there isn't anybody that's not touched. And not surprising, one of the real demand areas is human resources.
Okay, let's take a gallop around the markets, Nona.
Okay, yeah, so our dollar actually dropped because the U.S. dollar has been strengthening because people are still worried about that inflation coming through. Overall, the top index was little change, which is pretty good. We were up nearly 5 points to 12,753, and that's against an Asian backdrop of some real drops there because of concern over tech stocks. The New Zealand dollar, 69.8 US cents. Now, you might remember earlier in the week, we were at 70.9, so a big drop. And 93.6 Australian, so that we're holding our strength against there, and 50.7 pence, which is, again, hardly little changed.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite. Ports of Auckland have received a request from a deep-sea fishing vessel with 2 COVID-infected crew members on board. The Spanish-flagged Viking Bay is on limbo off the coast of Taranaki, but that port won't take it. It's now asked Auckland if it can berth there. Now, a second fishing boat wants to dock in New Zealand because crew have flu-like symptoms. Ane te kaiwi poata, Robin Martin.
Sick and stuck at sea. That's what the crew on board the Viking Bay face. But on the streets of New Plymouth, most don't want it to dock.
No, not I should be out where they are.
There isn't a place in New Plymouth for them to be isolated.
It'd be a terrible feeling to be stuck out there. I think it's a little bit hard.
I just can't believe they came here without even being quarantined. Obviously, the welfare of the sailors should be paramount.
We need to keep ourselves safe, and I think they've done the right thing.
See them out at sea. We don't want them here.
An all-of-government response team is working out the next steps for the vessel, but it's unlikely it will return to Port Taranaki. It's now been confirmed one of the mariners has a Delta variant not linked to any other New Zealand cases. They, along with the second case and 13 other crew members, are expected to go into an MIQ facility. New Plymouth has none. COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins says logistics will play a determining role in where the ship goes.
We don't want people floating out at sea if they're sick from COVID. We do want to be able to bring them on shore and make sure they're getting the isolation and the treatment that they need so that they are all kept safe.
The National Secretary of the Maritime Union, Craig Harrison, is surprised it's not been decided where the vessel can dock.
I think our main concern is to make sure that the crew is safe and being looked after, so I welcome them trying to make arrangements for them, but as yet it still hasn't happened, has it? So.
Meanwhile, a second foreign-owned fishing boat operating here has reported it has a number of crew on board with flu-like symptoms. Craig Harrison says providing help to them should be a no-brainer.
You know, any ship in distress, and they call for assistance, it's usually given. It's a given that, you know, a ship in distress is helped, because, you know, you're talking about people. The crew are actually people, they're human beings.
The vessel is outside New Zealand territorial waters and presents no immediate risk. Meanwhile, the shipping agent who represented the Viking Bay in New Plymouth, Billy Preston, says he's had no update from the ship's master on the crew's condition.
No, they were just being isolated from everybody else and seeing what's happening. If there was any concern in regards to their health, I'm pretty sure that the captain would be making calls to come back to try and work out how he's going to get the guys off or treat the problem.
He reckons the ship could have docked with minimal or no contact with port staff, but he understands Port Taranaki's decision to bar it from entry. Port Taranaki CEO Guy Roper declined an interview, but says he stands by his decision. Don Matthews is a director of Technics, a bitumen supply company located at the port. He backed the decision to keep the Viking Bay offshore.
I think their primary duty of care is to look after their activities at the port. That's their business.
Mr. Matthews says it's the Ministry of Health's role to make sure the crew are okay. Health officials continue to regard the situation with the Viking Bay as low risk, and there remains no associated locations of interest.
Recent clashes between protesters and security guards at a controversial marina development on Waiheke Island have now triggered police investigations. Protect Puteke has been occupying the site for 120 days, which they say endangers a nearby Korora colony. The developer rejects those claims. Te Arawa Rolliston is here with this report.
It was this incident that appears to have caught police's attention. In this video, security officers can be seen in scuffles with protesters. One protester is pushed into the water and kicked in the face. Liz and Gal were two of the protesters who were injured in the incident yesterday. Speaking to me today, Gal said he was lucky.
Pushed me into the water, and then as I was in the water, kicked me in the face. If it wasn't the boy behind me, I would have probably smashed into the rocks, and I don't know what would have happened after that. I wasn't wearing a life jacket.
What kind of injuries did you guys sustain?
My neck really hurts. It might have been because of the kick, and it might have been because of when he kicked me after that for like 3-4 minutes.
Police presence on site has decreased since yesterday's events. But today a police vessel came to shore to drop officers off who have continued to monitor the area surrounding the marina throughout the day. Police say investigations have begun into all allegations of criminal offending at the marina development on Waiheke Island. Inspector Gary Davey of Auckland Central Police says officers are monitoring the ongoing dispute. He says the police are speaking to both parties with a view to resolving the standoff. One protester, Muckle, at the site says it's been a difficult couple of days.
No, it's dangerous. Like, you do not need to go to this level with these people. When you boot someone in the head, that's not reasonable force. When you use a hook and a paddle as a weapon on people, that's not reasonable force. When you use a hook to drag a person through the water, you know, with them screaming,
A small crowd of onlookers and supporters have lined the fence, preventing anyone wandering onto the rocks near the protesters' makeshift campsite. Throughout the day, members of the public have met protesters to deliver gear, warm clothes, tents, blankets and supplies. One of the protesters, Emily Meyer Weiss, says they are not backing down.
We're safe out there, we're safe in the ocean, and we're safe as long as hands aren't laid on us, as long as excessive force and violence isn't used to clear us out. We need Auckland Council and the ministers to intervene now, because this is the violence is increasing upon us, and we need our government to call this out.
The director of the development group, Kennedy Point Boat Harbour Limited, Kit Littlejohn, says an internal review was underway to address the issues involved in the clashes. And in a separate bid to stop the construction this morning, Ngāti Pawa Trust Board has taken the developer to the Environment Court, claiming they breached their resource consent conditions by removing rocks from a wall.
The Kennedy Point developer says the video showing a security guard kicking a protester in the face isn't an accurate representation of the confrontation. Marina Director Kit Littlejohn says there have been significant offending aimed at security guards. However, he says the company does not condone the unprovoked or unreasonable use of force by anyone, and an internal investigation of the actions of security staff has begun. Late this afternoon, Ngāti Pawa negotiated a stop work at the site until Monday. And if you want to look at the video there, we will put that full piece up on our Facebook page. It is 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And Muriaki in Pita Pita Kōrero, after the news at 6, the government's recipe for better health, compulsory folic acid in bread. In a highly unusual move, National has given a Labour MP one of its speaking slots in Parliament. During a debate on the Zero Suicide Report, National's Matt Ducey told the House Labour's MP, Larissa Wall, was blocked from speaking by her own party. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
It's a sobering subject, and MPs lined up to contribute. National's Matt Ducey said New Zealand lost 654 people to suicide last year, and the background statistics are confronting.
150,000 Kiwis every year think about taking their life. 50,000 Kiwis make a suicide plan. 20,000 Kiwis attempt to take their own life. These are the harsh truths behind suicide in New Zealand.
While he wanted to keep the debate non-political, he was highly critical of Labour for its treatment of its own MP.
What I think is absolutely disgusting is Labour blocked Larissa Wall from taking a call in this debate. Larissa Wall is a founding member of the cross-party mental health group. She championed this report and worked hard on it. She has been blocked from taking a call on this debate, so National has given Larissa one of their calls.
Ex-Karen Chaw shared her own deeply personal story
Of feeling like the world would be better off without me in it. There have been moments in life where the world seemed so complicated that nobody understood me, and I wasn't worth being understood. There were times I was sad and could not even tell you why I was sad.
Our ex-colleague Mark Cameron talked about the farming community and its often silent struggle with mental health.
Mr. Speaker, in 32 years I have seen it all. I have seen drug use, run amok and depression. I have also buried 4 of my farming colleagues. Rural folk often in other times referred to it as the black dog, or the hitchhiker, or the bloody thief in the night.
Te Pāti Māori co-leader Debbie Ngāri Rapaka told the House Māori are extremely vulnerable.
Wakamā shame is one of the biggest killers of Māori. To wakamā, to ask for help out of addictions, to ask for help when we're poverty, to ask for help out of abuse, to ask for help when our whānau aren't doing well.
Larissa Wall thanked the National Party for allowing her to participate in the debate, citing her membership of the cross-party group. She said the Zero Suicide Report was clear
it is preventable. What do we need to do to provide us, all of us, with the tools to be able to mitigate the complexity of life?
Louisa Wall told RNZ it was discussed with colleagues, but she did not appear on Labour's speaking list. Party Whip Kieran McAnulty says the government decided it was important to allocate spots to the most relevant ministers, the chair of the Health Select Committee, and MPs representing Māori and rural communities.
Now, if you'd like to talk to someone about mental health, you can text or call 1737 for free anytime, 1737, or 0800 Lifeline, and we'll put a full list of numbers up on our website. A Papatui mother whose family is still living apart after last month's tornado has opened up about the disaster's lingering financial and emotional burden. Carla Makiha is still looking for suitable long-term accommodation nearly a month after the twister destroyed her family home. Here's our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe.
Carla Makiha is bracing herself, preparing for a year of effectively paying for 2 homes. Right now, she, her husband and 3 children are in limbo, living across 2 hotel rooms, about 3 by 8 metres. Her mother, who lived with the family, is bunking down with a relative. This is nowhere near a long-term solution, but Carla Makiha says finding more suitable long-term accommodation has been tough.
The priority is finding suitable housing for us whilst we rebuild our whare. Because to start to rebuild, we actually need to be back together, and being apart is not ideal.
Makiha wants to rebuild this home, but right now it's nowhere near livable.
And in the property market in Auckland, we're never going to get anything near what we have here. We were blessed to find this property. Our overtime tornado is going to take it away from me.
The roof has been torn off, its windows are shattered, it's shrink-wrapped to keep the water out. Luckily, at the time of the tornado, 2 of her sons were in a car at the front of the property. Makiha was out back with her mother, and the rest of the family were out. Her son's room is particularly grim, with shards of glass sprayed through it. Had anyone been inside at the time, Carla Makiha says this could have been a very different story.
We were safe, because otherwise you and I wouldn't be having this conversation at all, because we would have been in our living room, he would have been in his bed, and we would be having tangi.
This is home for now, basically.
Yeah, this is home. I don't see a seat, but there's only one.
The family is intact, but for now, this is it. 2 small hotel rooms not far from Auckland Airport, packed with the family's possessions. Carla says her old place was a hub. This is anything but.
I think that's probably, the longer this goes on, the harder it is for me. My family around, my friends around, my house is a hub. And this isn't, they'd come here in a heartbeat, but it's just not my home.
Initially, the family was paying for this itself, but then it had part of its accommodation allowance paid. But the rates here are premium, and insurance doesn't cover the lot.
So we're looking at, ideally, we'd be looking for a 3 to 4 bedroom home, and the market rates in Papatui, Manuko, 750, and that doesn't meet what we have been given at all. And then we're still paying a mortgage.
All of this, Carla Makiha says, will seriously hurt her family financially. It'll be noodles for the next 12 months, she says. And that's the hope. Be back home in Freiburg Ave within a year.
Almost heaven and earth to get back there within 12 months. Yep. But to get there, to get that process, we need to be settled in somewhere temporary first.
Many houses in the battered suburb remain seemingly untouched, tarps still draped on their roofs. In her case, Carla Makiha believes insurance has been, in a way, a barrier.
So you've got different services helping, but when you're an awesome taxpayer and a ratepayer and you tick all the correct boxes, you don't become a priority because you have insurance. And that's hard.
And it's not just her.
Now, you've been to my neighbours, you've seen my street. There are still tarpaulins on their houses.
The media circus may have moved on. The political photo ops have dried up. But nearly a month on from the tornado, this community struggle is far from over.
If you were listening to that story about Kala Makiha and you'd like to see the video, we'll put it up on our Facebook page. It was a truly beautiful game for England, not so much for Denmark, with an own goal in extra time deciding the match. In the end, England's 2-1 triumph sees it through to the Euro 2020 finals. Its first major football final since 1966, but it wasn't without a lot of nail-biting and nervous side glances at the TV. So imagine what it was actually like at Wembley. Footy fanatic Ben Mile was just leaving the stadium when I caught up with him.
I couldn't even hear my brother or my mum and dad next to me. Like, his earpieces and stuff. The noise was incredible. Fans were brilliant. We went 1-0 down and we, cheered them on to come back. The noise was amazing. It's absolutely rocking. Never heard anything like it. I've been to a fair amount of football matches and cricket matches, and I've had some great atmospheres, but that was up there. That was wow.
The Prince is on his feet. Well, the footballing gods really astounding.
What does it actually mean to you? I mean, you're obviously a massive fan, so explain to me how important it is. What does it mean?
This could stop the country come Monday morning. This is absolutely massive. After what's gone on over the last year and a half, this is exactly what everyone needs. But England's one of the biggest football nations, and if we win this, it'll be absolute carnage. We've won the Rugby World Cup, we've won Tour de France's, sort of in my lifetime, but never won football. This will be mental at home as well. It'll absolutely go off. Everyone, it's just the release everyone needed. If we can get this, it'll be unbelievable. I mean, even getting this far is great, but if we can win it, the place will absolutely rock for weeks, I think. Amazing.
Can you do it?
I think we can, yeah. I think we can. If they haven't got as quick players as we have, we can go at them. We've got the legs, we've got the players.
So then come finals, you reckon England's at a standstill, all eyes on the footy?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The country's not moving. The country's not moving. If you want to rob someone's house, if you want to go to a bank, crack on. Everyone's at home, everyone's at the stadium. There's only one place to be on Sunday night.
Hey, as you're leaving Wembley, what's the scene like? What have you seen in terms of the fans out on the streets and things?
Oh, there's cars honking. I've seen about 10 people, climbing on each other's sunroofs. Taxis are beeping the cars. We're getting away from the mayhem now, but everyone's singing the songs. There's 3 or 4 classic songs that we're really playing out.
Oh, come on, give us a few bars. What were you singing?
What was I singing?
Yeah,
Harry Maguire, drink the vodka, drink the Jaeger, I'm bloody massive. 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll you're the one. You still turn me on. Football's coming home again. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, sports journalist Alex Biddle was there too.
Well, Lisa, I've just left Wembley Stadium. I'm walking down Wembley Way now towards the tube station where thousands of fans are making their way home. What a result. It's coming home. And I've been speaking to a few on the way down, and it's disbelief more than anything.